The coffee shop fell silent in the strangest way, not because of noise, but because of tension. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, painting golden streaks across the polished wooden floor, but inside Adrian Voss's chest, everything felt cold. His fingers trembled slightly as he stared at the contract in his hands, the one that would seal the biggest deal of his life. $200 million. Years of sleepless nights, ruthless decisions, and sacrifices had led to this moment. He had everything to gain, and everything to lose. And then, a soft but firm voice cut through his thoughts. That's the wrong trick. It wasn't loud, it wasn't angry, but it stopped his world. Before we continue, if you believe kindness and second chances can change lives, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Midnight Tales. Your support helps bring more emotional stories like this to life. Adrian didn't look up immediately. He assumed it was someone talking to another customer. But when the shadow fell across his contract, he lifted his eyes, and saw her. She couldn't have been older than 23. Her name tag read, Maris Hale. Her hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and her uniform was slightly wrinkled, like someone who had bigger worries than appearances. She wasn't smiling the way service workers usually did. She was serious, almost afraid, but determined. Adrian frowned slightly. People didn't interrupt him, especially not cashiers. He was the CEO of Voss Dynamics, a company built from nothing. 15 years ago, he had slept in his car behind a grocery store, eating crackers to survive. He knew what it felt like to be invisible, and he had promised himself he would never be powerless again. Yet here he was, holding a pen above the signature line, hesitating. Maris pointed gently at the bottom of the contract. Her hand trembled just enough to reveal her nerves. She wasn't trying to embarrass him. She was trying to stop him. Adrian's jaw tightened. His business partner, Leonard Krell, sat across from him, smiling confidently. Leonard had orchestrated the entire acquisition. He was charming, persuasive, and had assured Adrian this deal would double their company's value overnight. But something about Leonard's smile had always felt rehearsed. Adrian looked back at Maris. She shouldn't have known anything about corporate contracts. She was just a cashier. But then he saw her eyes. They weren't the eyes of someone guessing. They were the eyes of someone remembering. His hand froze. For a moment, Adrian felt a strange sensation, like standing on the edge of a cliff and realizing the ground might not be solid. His entire career had been built on instinct, on reading people, on knowing when something felt wrong. And suddenly, it did. He lowered the pen slowly. Leonard's smile faltered for just a second. The sunlight shifted, illuminating a small paragraph at the bottom of the page, one Adrian hadn't paid attention to before. A clause buried beneath layers of legal language. Harmless at first glance, but devastating in reality. It granted Leonard silent control over critical assets if performance targets weren't met within an impossible timeframe. It wasn't a partnership. It was a takeover. Adrian's stomach dropped. Years ago, he had trusted someone else blindly, and it had cost him everything. His first startup had collapsed overnight because he signed something he didn't fully understand. He had spent years rebuilding himself from that mistake. And now, he had almost done it again. Leonard's voice broke the silence, smooth but tense. He urged Adrian to sign, reminding him of the opportunity, the profit, the future. But Adrian wasn't listening anymore. He was looking at Maris. She stepped back slightly, as if realizing she had crossed a line, her face flushed with fear, like she expected to be yelled at or fired. Adrian noticed something else then. A faint scar on her wrist. The kind left behind by someone who had worked too hard, too young. He remembered his own scars. He closed the contract. Leonard's smile disappeared completely. The deal was over. The silence that followed was heavy, but Adrian felt lighter than he had in years. Leonard left the cafe minutes later, his polished shoes echoing sharply against the floor, his expression cold. $200 million had just slipped through his fingers. But Adrian didn't feel loss. He felt clarity. He turned to Maris, who stood frozen behind the counter, her eyes wide with uncertainty. She looked like someone waiting for punishment. Instead, Adrian asked her a simple question. Why? Her voice shook as she explained. Her father had once lost everything after signing a contract he didn't fully understand. She had watched him fall into depression, watched their home disappear, watched hope fade from his eyes. She had learned to read contracts, not as a lawyer, but as a daughter trying to protect what little they had left. When she saw Adrian about to sign, she recognized the same trap. She couldn't stay silent, even if it cost her job, even if it wasn't her place, even if no one thanked her. Adrian felt something inside him shift. For years, people had respected him because of his power. But Maris had helped him without expecting anything in return. That was rare. That was real. He realized something then. Success wasn't just about winning deals. It was about knowing which deals weren't worth winning. Weeks later, Adrian sat in his office, looking out over the city he once struggled to survive in. He had walked away from the deal. Investors had questioned him. Some had called him foolish. But he knew the truth. He had protected his future. He had protected his company. And he had listened when it mattered most. He picked up his phone and made a call. Not to an investor. Not to a lawyer. To Maris. He offered her something she never expected. Not charity, but opportunity. An internship. A chance to learn, to grow, to step into a world she had only seen from the outside. Not because she was lucky. Because she was brave. Because she cared. Because she had changed his life. Months later, Maris stood in a real office, sunlight falling across her desk, her hands no longer trembling. She wasn't invisible anymore, and Adrian, watching from across the room, realized something even more valuable than money. He hadn't just avoided losing $200 million. He had found something priceless. A reminder of who he used to be. A reminder that sometimes, the smallest voice can save the biggest future. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and share it with someone who believes one act of courage can change everything. Special request. Comment, kindness wins, if you believe doing the right thing still matters in today's world. Because sometimes, the most powerful people aren't the ones who sign the biggest deals. They're the ones who have the courage to stop and listen.